Welcome to our podcast where we explore the art, psychology, and transformative power of coaching. In today's episode, we dive into the insights and practical wisdom from the Coaching Manual by Julie Starr, one of the most influential guides in modern coaching practice.
Thank you. It's really wonderful to be here. And I think if you're listening to this right now, whether you're commuting or, just sitting at your desk, we really want to completely reframe how you view your daily interactions.
Yeah, exactly.
Because coaching, I mean, it's not just some corporate tool or a performance improvement plan. It's a profound psychological framework that completely shifts how you relate to your colleagues, to your family, and honestly, to yourself.
Right. And our mission for this deep dive today is to really decode the psychology behind that shift. We're going to explore the cognitive mechanics of deep listening and look at how to master the structure of a transformational conversation.
hmm And building genuine emotional safety, which is so critical.
Exactly. And along the way, we're going to ask you to unlearn a deeply ingrained, honestly, surprisingly toxic habit that almost every high-achieving leader possesses.
Oh, yeah.
The obsessive need to fix people.
It's such a difficult habit to break, too, because, fixing people feels remarkably productive in the moment.
It really does. So as we dive in, I want to pose a question for you to carry through our entire conversation today. What if the most powerful leadership skill is not giving advice, but learning how to ask the right questions?
That question, I mean, it really strikes at the heart of what it means to be a modern leader. If you think about the traditional model of corporate leadership, it's entirely based on being the smartest person in the room.
Right. The leader as the oracle.
Exactly. People bring you their complex problems,
Yeah.
and you dispense these brilliant solutions. It feeds the ego.
Oh, absolutely.
But true coaching requires a complete inversion of that dynamic. It's not about asserting your own intellect. It's really about empowerment.
Let's unpack the mechanics of that shift, because we are essentially moving from a directive style to a collaborative one. And I think it actually helps to look at the literal origin of the word coach.
Oh, I love this part.
Right. Like historically, a coach referred to a stagecoach or a rail coach, a vehicle designed to transport someone from one place to another.
hmm
In executive development, you are acting as the vehicle to transport someone from their current state to a desired future state. But the vital psychological distinction is that they are the ones choosing the destination, and they are driving.
Yes. And when we look at the underlying psychology there, the distinction between a directive state and a collaborative state really comes down to cognitive load.
Okay, say more about that.
Well, a directive management style is essentially command and control, right? It relies heavily on the leader's authority. So a directive statement sounds like, I think you need to look at your time management.
You're diagnosing the problem and just handing them the prescription.
Exactly. Whereas a collaborative approach sounds like, what's happening with your time?
Right. But, and let me just play devil's advocate here, because I work with these high-functioning type A executives all the time.
Sure.
If you tell a CEO who has, quarterly targets breathing down her neck and 100 fires to put out that she needs to stop directing and start collaborating, she will laugh you out of the room.
Oh, yeah, they always do it first.
In a fast-paced corporate environment, isn't it simply faster and just way more efficient to just give the answer? Like, why take the time to collaborate when you already know exactly how to resolve the client dispute?
I mean, that is the most common pushback we see, and it's a totally valid reality check. In the micro moment, yes, giving the answer is faster.
Yeah.
If the building is on fire, you don't coach your team on how they feel about the exit route.
Oh, right. You just point to the door.
You direct them out the door, yeah. But we have to look at the long-term neurological consequence of doing that every single day.
Yeah.
When you direct someone constantly, you inadvertently create cognitive dependency.
Wow. Cognitive dependency.
Yeah, you're basically training their brain's prefrontal cortex to rely on your executive functioning rather than their own. If you constantly give the answer, you become the permanent bottleneck for their problem solving.
So you're forever trapped in the role of the fixer.
Precisely. Collaborative coaching builds independent, self-regulating employees. You're investing time up front to build a capacity that will eventually free up your time completely.
That makes a lot of sense. You're shifting them from mere compliance to actual deep commitment. And, it reminds me of the boundaries we have to set between different interpersonal support models. Because if you're listening, you might be thinking, well, I already mentor my team.
Right. But mentoring is fundamentally different.
Exactly. Mentoring relies on the mentor transferring their past expertise, saying, here is how I navigated this merger back in 2018.
Yeah.
Coaching isn't mentoring. It certainly isn't therapy, right?
Oh, definitely not. Therapy often focuses on uh, healing past trauma or unpacking clinical historical issues. Coaching is entirely goal-based and future-focused.
So give me an example of that distinction.
Sure. So if an executive is working 12-hour days and it's causing severe stress in their marriage, a therapist might psychoanalyze the childhood roots of their workaholism, looking for their need for validation.
Digging into the past.
Right. But a transformational coach won't do that. The coach will focus purely on practical, forward-looking solutions, like how to restructure their week, how to delegate effectively, and how to establish the boundaries required to just log off at 5 p.m.
Okay, that distinction really keeps the boundaries clean. Now, to actually execute this collaborative style, the manual emphasizes that a coach must adopt a fundamentally different internal mindset. And the book is clear that you cannot fake this.
No, you really can't. Human beings are exquisitely tuned to microexpressions and tonal shifts.
Right.
Our mirror neurons are just constantly scanning for threat or judgment. So the foundational operating principles of a transformational coach require this profound internal recalibration. And the first one, which is probably the most challenging, is a commitment to non-judgment.
Wait, hold on. You're telling high-functioning, highly analytical leaders to just, empty their minds and suspend judgment?
Basically, yeah.
That sounds almost impossible. Like, how do you actually do that when the company is losing money and the person sitting in front of you clearly made a terrible decision?
It's hard. It requires an operational mode that borders on the meditative. To truly hear someone, you have to suspend your own moral, practical, or efficiency-based sorting mechanisms.
Okay.
Because the moment you start thinking, well, that was a remarkably foolish email to send to the board, your brain has exited the collaborative relationship.
You become a critic.
Exactly. You stop listening to understand, and you start listening to prosecute.
Mm-hmm.
Non-judgment means receiving their reality as raw, valid data. You don't have to agree with their choices. You just have to observe them without immediately sorting them into good or bad buckets.
Which ties perfectly into the next core principle, which is truth and integrity. And the rule here acts as a natural guardrail against that internal prosecution you just mentioned. The rule is simply, never say anything about the person that you wouldn't want them to hear.
That's a powerful one.
It really is. If you maintain that standard, it forces a discipline of respect.
Right, and that profound respect is the prerequisite for the third principle, which is responsibility.
Oh, this is a big one.
Yeah, as a coach, you must operate from the absolute, unshakable assumption that the individual is responsible for the results they are generating. You are shifting them from being a passive victim of their circumstances to a powerful actor who actually has agency over their environment.
There's a brilliant scenario in the source material that illustrates this involving a professional named Scott. Let's really dig into Scott's case because his situation is so incredibly common.
Oh yeah, the Scott case is classic.
Right. So Scott felt completely trapped by his manager's relentless, unreasonable demands. He was in full victim mode, he felt like his life was no longer his own, he was burned out, and he was deeply resentful. And if you're a typical manager listening to him, you either validate his victimhood by saying, you're right, your boss is terrible, or you tell him to quit.
And both of those standard responses completely strip Scott of his agency.
Precisely. But a coach operating from the principle of responsibility doesn't do either of those things. The coach systematically guided Scott to adopt a perspective of personal ownership.
Right. By carefully examining the situation, Scott realized he actually always had options.
Yes.
He could leave the company, he could draw a hard boundary and risk getting fired, or, and this is key, he could consciously choose to accept the grueling demands in exchange for his high salary.
And just the realization that staying was a conscious choice rather than a prison sentence completely changed his psychology.
What's fascinating about that is that the external reality didn't change one bit. The demanding manager, the heavy workload, all exactly the same.
Wow.
Only Scott's internal framework changed. He moved from I have to do this to I am choosing to do this. But, for a coach to facilitate that mental shift, they must hold the fourth principle, which is positive expectation.
Meaning you have to actually believe in them.
Exactly. You must genuinely believe that the person in front of you is capable of better results and deeper insight. Because if you secretly doubt them, if you think they're incompetent or beyond help, you will inadvertently sabotage their growth.
It leaks out, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. Your questions will become condescending, your tone will flatten, and they will feel managed rather than empowered.
That brings up a massive ego trap, I think. It's the temptation of the "what would you do?" question. You're sitting there, you're an experienced leader, and your colleague looks at you and says, "Well, what do you think I should do about this project?"
Oh, it's so tempting.
It is biologically seductive to lean back, stroke your chin, and dispense your brilliance. You literally get a dopamine hit from feeling needed.
You do. It feeds the ego perfectly. But the transformational coach must remember that the individual is entirely capable of generating perfect solutions for their own highly specific context.
Can you give an example of that?
Yeah, so consider the classic example from the book of a working mother who is struggling with her schedule. She's exhausted, barely hitting her targets. Through conversation, it becomes clear she needs a better childcare setup.
Right.
Now, if you, the leader, advise her to change her childcare, she is highly likely to resist it. It feels like an intrusion, like a judgment on her parenting.
Oh, I can completely see that causing defensiveness.
Exactly. But if you use careful exploration to help her realize it on her own, she owns the solution completely. There is no resistance, only empowerment, because the idea originated in her own prefrontal cortex.
To understand the coach's mindset here, I actually like to think about it not as a mentor or a guide, but as a lens.
A lens, I like that.
Yeah, like a camera lens doesn't give advice on the landscape, right? It doesn't tell the mountain to move slightly to the left. It simply pulls the reality into sharp, high-definition focus. It clarifies the image so clearly that the person looking through it can orient themselves. If we can just act as high-definition lenses, our people will navigate their own terrain.
That's an excellent way to conceptualize it. But, to be a high-definition lens, you have to develop extraordinary sensory equipment, which leads us directly into the practical tools of coaching.
Yeah.
And the most crucial of those is the psychology of deep listening.
Which is way harder than it sounds.
So much harder. We tend to think of listening as a binary state-like. You're either awake and listening or you're asleep. But it actually operates on distinct frequencies.
Let's bypass the basic definitions and look at the internal friction of these 4 levels of listening from the manual, because it's a massive reality check.
Go for it.
Level 1 is cosmetic listening. We all know this one. You're nodding, you're making eye contact, but mentally you are reviewing your grocery list.
We've all been there.
Oh, yeah. Then level 2 is conversational listening. This is where most high achievers live, and it is remarkably hard to break out of.
It is, because conversational listening is the standard mode of human dialogue. You're engaged, you're hearing the words, but you are primarily waiting for your turn to speak.
Right. You're just formulating your response.
Exactly. You're thinking of your counterargument or your own relatable anecdote while the other person is still talking. You are centering your own experience. It's highly functional for a dinner party, but it is fatal for coaching.
Because you're not actually processing their reality, you're just preparing yours.
Right.
Then we get to level 3, which is active listening. This is where you are highly focused, you're recording facts, and confirming your understanding. So the budget was cut by 20% and your team is demoralized.
Which is very necessary in business.
It is. But the true paradigm shift happens at level 4, deep listening. What does that actually feel like neurologically?
Deep listening is almost an altered state of awareness. Your own internal monologue goes completely quiet. You are no longer formulating your next brilliant question. You are focused purely on the speaker's essence.
So it's beyond just the word.
Way beyond. You aren't just hearing the syntax of their sentences. You're processing the shifts in their breathing, the micro-hesitations, the sudden drop in pitch when they mention a specific colleague. Deep listening allows you to hear what is unsaid.
Wow.
You hear the fear vibrating beneath the anger or, the deep hesitation masking itself as bravado.
But to get someone to reveal that level of vulnerability so you can actually hear it, you have to establish profound emotional safety first. You have to build rapport.
Absolutely.
And rapport relies heavily on the psychological principle of sameness. We fundamentally trust people who are like us or who reflect us. So at a basic level, a coach might use physical matching, subtly mirroring their posture, adopting a similar tone of voice, or matching their pacing.
Yes, physiological synchronization.
Right, but I have to challenge this.
Okay, challenge away.
Isn't this just manipulative mirroring? Like, if someone crosses their arms and leans back, and then I consciously cross my arms and lean back, won't they just feel like they're being mocked? Where is the line between a psychological technique and genuine authenticity?
That is such an important question. And that is precisely what happens when the technique is disconnected from the intent.
Okay, explain that.
If your internal intention is merely to control the conversation or to artificially manufacture trust so you can extract information, physical matching will feel incredibly creepy and robotic.
Right, they'll sense it.
Yeah, your micro-expressions won't align with your posture, and their amygdala will subconsciously flag you as a threat. But, and this is the key, if your intention is truly to understand them, if your internal narrative is, how is this person the same as me? How can I connect with their humanity?
Then it changes.
Completely. Then the physiological matching happens entirely naturally. You lean in when they lean in because you are genuinely captivated. The technique must follow the heart, never the other way around.
That makes perfect sense. The alignment has to be internal first. And in building that emotional safety, there's also a critical boundary between empathy and sympathy. Sympathy is a massive trap for naturally caring leaders.
It really is. Because empathy is understanding their pain.
Yeah.
You comprehend the emotional weight of their situation and you validate it, but you remain objectively grounded.
And the sympathy.
Sympathy is taking on their sadness. If your colleague is devastated about a project failure and you become depressed and devastated with them, you've lost your utility.
You're just in the hole with them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You are now swimming in the emotional soup with them. It drains your energetic reserves and destroys your ability to act as that clear, high-definition lens we talked about earlier. You must maintain a compassionate professional boundary.
So you have established this deep empathetic rapport. You are operating in a state of quiet, deep listening. This naturally gives rise to intuition. You start noticing the anomalies in their story. And that intuition informs the most powerful tool any leader has at their disposal, the question.
Questions are the steering wheel of the entire coaching architecture. But we have to be incredibly careful about the types of questions we ask. A great question influences without controlling.
The danger here is when high achievers accidentally disguise advice and judgment as open questions. We call this leading the witness.
Well, this happens all the time.
It does. Instead of asking a neutral question, a manager will ask, "Don't you think it was a mistake to email the client that specific phrasing?"
Right, and when you ask, don't you think it was a mistake, you are asserting your judgment wrapped in a question mark. You immediately put them on the defensive.
You've backed them into a corner.
You've triggered their threat response, shutting down the prefrontal cortex where creative problem-solving happens. They now feel they have to justify their action to you, the authority figure.
So what's the alternative?
A neutral question like, what was your thought process when drafting that email? That creates a spaciousness where they can safely examine their own behavior without feeling attacked.
And this is where trusting your intuition to guide those neutral questions becomes so critical. There is a profound scenario in the book that illustrates this.
The executive with the interviews.
Yes. Consider this executive who is brilliant on paper, hyper-competent, but keeps inexplicably blowing high-level job interviews. Logically, on the surface, it seems like a standard confidence issue or maybe a lack of targeted interview prep.
Right, and a standard manager would just drill them on mock interviews.
Exactly. But a coach, operating in that state of deep listening, intuitively senses a hidden agenda. They notice a mismatch between the executive's logical desire for the job and their subtle behavioral self-sabotage.
And instead of just running through interview role play, the coach trusts that intuitive hit. They ask a seemingly left-field, completely neutral question about the executive's family dynamics, specifically about their father.
And that single question cracks the psychological safe wide open.
It really does. It uncovers that the executive had a highly critical father who had always told him he wasn't good enough for the C-suite. Subconsciously, the executive was failing these interviews to prove his father right.
It was a deeply ingrained psychological loyalty playing out in the boardroom.
Exactly.
It honestly gives me chills just analyzing that mechanism, because no amount of resume tweaking or posture training would have ever fixed that. The coach had to use intuition to ask the question that surfaced the invisible psychological barrier.
Yep.
And following a powerful paradigm-shifting question like that, you must use an equally powerful, often terrifying tool, which is silence.
Silence is deeply uncomfortable for most leaders. We are conditioned to abhor dead air. We think silence means the conversation has stalled or that we need to rush in and rescue the person.
Right, we want to fill the space.
But for the individual receiving the question, silence feels entirely different. It feels like an expansive, creative space. When you ask a question that shatters their current worldview, their brain literally needs time to wire new neural pathways.
That's a great way to put it.
Coaches have to learn to sit in the physical discomfort of silence and let the internal connections form. If you jump in to fill the silence, you short-circuit their realization. You literally steal their aha moment.
Okay, but what happens when deep listening and great questions aren't enough? Because eventually, as a leader, you have to deliver hard truths.
True.
What happens when you're staring at an employee who is actively self-destructing, they're missing deadlines, and you have to intervene? How do you deliver feedback without destroying the psychological safety you just spent all this time building?
Delivering supportive feedback requires clinical precision. You have to separate factual, observable behavior from subjective emotion or motive.
Give me an example of what not to do.
Well, if you say to an employee, "You clearly don't respect my authority when I give you the sales targets," you are assigning an emotion and a sinister motive to them. They will immediately argue with you.
Because you're attacking their character.
Right. Instead, you must state the undeniable, observable behavior. So you say, "When I read the sales targets, I noticed you raised your eyebrows, crossed your arms, and leaned back in your chair."
It creates a neutral starting point.
Mm.
They cannot argue that they didn't cross their arms.
Oh, exactly.
Then you can ask what was going through your mind at that moment. But, even when we frame feedback perfectly, there are toxic traps that leaders fall into when trying to coach through a problem.
Oh, there are so many traps.
And the most insidious one is the fix-it trap, the rush to solve surface problems.
High achievers love playing fix-it because it provides an immediate biological reward. You feel heroic.
Let's expand on the scenario of the interior designer to show how dangerous this is. Imagine a highly paid, stressed-out corporate director comes to you and says, "I am burning out. I can't look at another spreadsheet. I think I need to quit my job and become an interior designer." A fix-it coach immediately lights up. They start brainstorming design schools. They talk about financing a small business. They map out a 3-year transition plan. They are solving the presenting problem.
Right. But a transformational coach hits the brakes.
Exactly.
Why? Because the presenting problem is almost never the real problem.
Yes. The coach asks deeper questions. What is it about interior design that specifically appeals to you? What emotional state is missing from your current role? And through that exploration, they uncover that the director doesn't actually want to risk their livelihood, lose their equity, and start a grueling small business. They simply have a desperate, suffocating need for a creative outlet that their current role is stifling.
The coach saves them from a disastrous, impulsive career change by refusing to fix the first problem presented.
That is the profound danger of taking the presenting problem at face value. The second trap mentioned is what we call strategizing. This is a form of covert manipulation. It's when you, as the manager, have already decided exactly what the employee needs to realize, and you ask a series of carefully constructed leading questions designed to box them into a corner.
So they have the realization you pre-planned for them.
Exactly. It completely lacks authenticity. You're playing a game of psychological chess, and again, the employee's amygdala will pick up on the manipulation. They will feel managed and maneuvered rather than coached and respected.
And the third trap is chasing the breakthrough high. Coaching can be incredibly dramatic sometimes. When someone has a massive realization, there might be tears. There's a palpable shift in the room's energy.
It's very cinematic.
It is, and it's an enormous ego boost for the coach.
Yeah.
But the trap is that you start chasing that tearful, magical high every single session. You start trying to force deep psychological breakthroughs when sometimes the person just needs to figure out how to prioritize their inbox.
Right.
You have to value the slow, steady, unglamorous progress just as much as the big cinematic moments.
But we have to address the reality of emotional blowback here. What do you do if you do everything right? You give purely factual feedback, you avoid the fix-it trap, you don't strategize, but the employee still gets intensely defensive, angry, or starts yelling.
Yeah, how do you handle that? Because human egos are fragile. When an ego feels threatened, the defense mechanisms deploy aggressively.
You must rely on a 3-step self-management tool to de-escalate their nervous system.
Okay, walk us through that.
Step 1, awareness. Notice your own physiological response. Notice your heart rate spiking, your jaw clenching, or your desire to snap back.
Right, taking your own pulse first.
Exactly. Step 2, acknowledgement. Internally accept that this is happening without judging yourself or them. Just say to yourself, okay, they are highly activated and I am feeling defensive.
Okay, and step 3.
Step 3, substitution. Consciously replace your defensive impulse with a refocus on their experience. Do not argue the facts. Do not say, but you did miss the deadlines.
That just pours gasoline on the fire.
Right. Instead, substitute your anger with profound curiosity. Say, I can see this feedback is deeply frustrating for you. Help me understand what you are experiencing right now.
That's brilliant.
You de-escalate by validating their emotional reality, which eventually allows their logical brain, the prefrontal cortex, to come back online.
It's emotional de-escalation. You don't block their kinetic energy, you redirect it into exploration.
Exactly. So we've explored the mindset, the neuroscience of listening, the architecture of questions, and how to navigate feedback. Let's bring this down to the ground now.
Let's do it.
How do we map these psychological skills onto an actual 60-minute meeting in the real world? The manual outlines a framework of 5 clear stages for a coaching conversation.
Yes, the architecture of the session itself. Stage 1 is establish conversation. This is creating the climate.
Yeah.
It's not just small talk about the weather. It's consciously calibrating the emotional temperature of the room.
Building that initial rapport.
Right, and setting a firm psychological boundary that this hour is a safe, focused space away from the chaos of the office.
Stage 2 is identify topic and goal, finding the real thread. It's ensuring that you aren't just complaining aimlessly for an hour, but that you have a clear, agreed-upon destination for the session.
And then stage 3 is surface understanding and insight. This is the core of the session. This is the heavy lifting, where you use your deep listening and neutral questions to dig into the details.
Challenging their assumptions.
Exactly, helping them view their own mind from a new vantage point.
Let's walk through a highly detailed scenario to illustrate this, because I think it helps ground it. Let's talk about an executive named Phil.
Okay, Phil.
Phil comes to you because he wants help with his public speaking. His presenting problem is that he completely froze, forgot his metrics, and embarrassed himself during a presentation to the senior executive board. Now, a lesser coach would immediately leap to stage 4 shaping agreements and start giving Phil tactical presentation tips, like breathe from your diaphragm or memorize your opening hook.
Which is the fix-it trap in action.
Exactly. But a master coach stays firmly in stage 3, surfacing understanding. The coach asks Phil to compare the disastrous executive meeting with client meetings where Phil is known to excel and be highly charismatic.
Oh, that's a great question.
The coach asks, what is structurally different in your mind between these two scenarios? And through deep exploration, Phil realizes that he views client meetings as a collaborative environment. His internal narrative is that his role is to support his team and serve the client.
Okay, and the executive meetings.
He views the executive meetings as the lion's den, a place where the board is actively trying to destroy his credibility, and his sole objective is simply to survive.
The insight there is profound. The problem was never his public speaking skills. The problem was his psychological framing.
Exactly.
Because he framed the executive meeting as a literal threat to his survival, his brain triggered a biological fight-or-flight response, flooding his system with cortisol and causing him to freeze.
Yes. The solution wasn't speech coaching. It was a mental shift in how he viewed the senior team. And once that insight surfaced in stage 3, moving to stage 4 shape agreements was incredibly easy.
Because in stage 4, you are summarizing that newly discovered insight into concrete action. So Phil agrees to mentally prepare for the executive meetings the exact same way he prepares for client meetings.
Consciously focusing on collaboration and value add rather than survival.
Right. And finally, stage 5 is completion. This is the final check and validation, ensuring the individual feels complete, acknowledging the difficult psychological work they just did, and officially closing the space of the session.
And, if we zoom out from the single 60-minute session to the macro level of a multi-month engagement, we also have to look at the 4 stages of a coaching assignment.
Right, the broader context.
You have context setting the ground rules and logistics. You have direction where 360-degree feedback tools might be used to get an objective baseline of the person's reputation.
Yeah.
You have review checking in to ensure the coaching is actually driving behavioral change. And crucially, you have completion.
Completion of the assignment is absolutely vital. Coaching must eventually end.
Right.
If a coaching relationship goes on indefinitely without evolving, it risks creating the exact dependency we are trying to avoid. The goal is to build a self-sustaining engine of self-awareness in the individual, not to become their permanent psychological crutch.
That brings us to our final and arguably most critical theme. Ultimately, the effectiveness of any coaching structure, the 5 stages, the questioning techniques, the deep listening, relies entirely on the emotional maturity of the leader facilitating it.
Absolutely.
If you, as the coach, are a mess internally, all of these tools are completely useless.
When you look at Daniel Goleman's seminal work on emotional intelligence, it maps perfectly onto this environment.
Walk us through that.
First is self-awareness. As a coach, you must intimately know your own triggers, your own biases, and your own limitations. If you're deeply uncomfortable with silence, you need to know that about yourself so you don't sabotage the session by filling the void.
So true.
Second is self-management. This is maintaining your composure when an employee is being frustrating, resistant, or aggressive.
Third is awareness of others. Accurately reading the emotional temperature of the room. Recognizing when someone's nervous system is overwhelmed and they need a break, or when they're using humor to avoid a painful topic and need a gentle push.
Mm-hmm.
And fourth is relationship management. Sustaining trust over time, repairing ruptures when you inevitably make a mistake, and keeping the boundaries healthy.
To illustrate how emotional maturity changes the game, consider the scenario of Caroline, the tough battler.
Caroline.
Caroline was a brilliant, highly effective marketing director, but she was working massive hours, burning out, and completely alienating her team with an aggressive micromanaging style.
A standard management intervention might just tell her to be nicer or delegate more.
Right. But through transformational coaching, Caroline was helped to realize that her aggressive controlling style wasn't born of malice or ego. It was tied to a deep, unexamined fear of losing control and failing.
She was gripping the steering wheel so tightly because she was terrified of crashing the car.
Yes. By elevating Caroline's emotional maturity, by helping her become self-aware of that underlying fear and learn to self-manage it, the coach allowed her to finally let go. Elevating her internal maturity was the only thing that allowed her to delegate safely and effectively in the external world.
It is the ultimate proof that you cannot separate the professional from the psychological. You manage the mind to manage the business.
That is so well said.
I think of the coach's emotional maturity like the suspension system on a high-performance vehicle. If your internal suspension is rigid, every single bump in the road, every defensive comment, every missed target from your employee sends your whole vehicle veering off the road.
Right, you react to their chaos with your own chaos.
Exactly. But if your emotional suspension is finely calibrated, you absorb the shock of their frustration or their defensiveness without losing your trajectory. You maintain the smooth ride so they can figure out how to navigate. You have to secure your own emotional regulation before you can possibly assist anyone else with theirs.
That is exactly it. You must be the adaptive, calm center of gravity in the conversation.
We have covered incredible ground today. If you're listening to this right now, we've journeyed from understanding that coaching isn't just a corporate buzzword. It is a profound way of relating to other humans.
Mm-hmm.
It is rooted in the difficult, unnatural discipline of non-judgment. It requires operating on the neurological frequency of deep listening. And it rests entirely on the core, unshakable belief that the people around you have the innate power to solve their own complex problems.
It is a radical shift in perspective. And to leave you with the final provocative thought to mull over, what if your primary job as a leader, as a partner, or even as a friend is simply to be a high-quality mirror?
A mirror.
What changes in your life tomorrow if you stop exhausting yourself trying to fix the people around you and start trusting them instead? What if the greatest gift you can give someone is the silent space to hear their own brilliance?
Thank you for joining us in this exploration of coaching, leadership, and human transformation. Until next time, keep listening deeply, keep asking meaningful questions, and keep growing.